Ask a man what women find attractive, and he'll talk about height, jawlines, broad shoulders, six-pack abs, money, status, the things he can see in a mirror or count in a bank account. The tangible, measurable, obvious markers that the world has spent decades drilling into his head as the currency of attraction. Now ask a woman what made her fall in love with her partner, not what caught her eye, what made her fall, what made her stay. What made her look at this one specific man out of every man she'd ever met and think, him, it's always going to be him. This video is about those qualities. 8 of them. And if you carry even 3, you possess something that most men will spend their entire lives trying to buy, perform, or fake. Something you can't buy, can't perform, can't fake. Something that's either in you or it isn't. Sign 5 is the one that separates men women date from men women build empires beside. And when I describe it, you're either going to recognize yourself or you're going to understand exactly what you need to develop. Let's begin. Sign 1. Your emotional climate doesn't change based on who's in the room. Most men are emotional chameleons. They shift tone, energy, body language, and even values depending on who they're talking to. One version for the boss, another for the boys, another for the woman they're trying to impress, a softer version for their mother, a harder version for strangers. 5 different men walking around in one body, each one activated by whoever happens to be standing in front of them. Women detect this faster than you can possibly imagine, not consciously, not by analyzing your behavior across contexts. They feel it. The way you feel a temperature change when you walk from one room to another. Something about your energy shifts when a new person enters, and she registers that shift as instability, as performance. As a man who doesn't have a fixed center, now consider the opposite. A man whose emotional climate stays the same regardless of the room. Same warmth with the CEO as with the waiter. Same calm under pressure as in moments of ease. Same groundedness when she's watching and when she's not. Same values on display on the first date as on the 1000th day. That consistency is one of the rarest qualities in human psychology. And it's one of the most deeply craved by women who have been through enough inconsistent men to understand what consistency actually means. Because inconsistency creates anxiety. When a woman can't predict which version of you is going to show up, her nervous system stays on alert. She's constantly calibrating, constantly reading the room to figure out which version she's dealing with today. That's exhausting. That's destabilizing. And eventually, that's a relationship she leaves because she never felt like she was standing on solid ground. Your consistency doesn't just make her feel attracted, it makes her feel anchored. Like she can plan a future around you because the you she fell for isn't a seasonal version that expires when circumstances change. That's not a quality she finds nice, it's a quality she finds necessary. And the number of men who actually have it is vanishingly small. If you're the same person in every room, you possess something more valuable than any physical trait the world has taught you to chase. Sign 2. You respond to conflict with curiosity instead of defensiveness. This is the quality that makes a woman stop mid-argument and think, this man is different from every man I've ever known. Because here's what most men do when conflict arises. They defend, they deflect, they escalate, they shut down. They turn every disagreement into a battle that has to be won or a threat that has to be neutralized. The emotional temperature spikes and their entire system shifts into combat mode, treating the woman across from them as an adversary to defeat rather than a partner to understand. You don't do that. When she's upset, when she challenges you, when the conversation turns tense and uncomfortable, something different happens inside you. Instead of the defensive wall going up, a question forms. What's actually happening here? What is she trying to tell me underneath the words she's using? What does she need that she's not directly asking for? That's curiosity, in the middle of conflict. And it's so rare that most women have literally never experienced it from a man. Research in relationship psychology particularly the work of the Gottman Institute, has identified this quality as one of the strongest predictors of long-term relationship success. Couples where at least one partner responds to conflict with genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness show dramatically lower rates of divorce, higher relationship satisfaction, and deeper reported intimacy over time. And the reason is simple. Defensiveness ends conversations. Curiosity deepens them. When you get defensive, you're telling her that your ego matters more than her experience. When you get curious, you're telling her that understanding her matters more than being right. And a woman who feels that, who experiences a man choosing to understand her instead of defending himself in the heat of a difficult moment, bonds to that quality at a level that physical attraction can't reach. This isn't about being passive. It's not about letting her walk over you. It's about having the emotional intelligence to recognize that most conflicts aren't about the surface issue. They're about the feeling underneath. And you have the rare capacity to look past the surface and ask, what's really going on here? Without your ego getting in the way. That question, asked sincerely in the middle of tension, has saved more relationships than any grand romantic gesture ever has. Sign 3. You carry ambition without wearing it. The world is full of ambitious men. Men who talk about their goals, their plans, their vision, their grind, their hustle, their 5-year trajectory toward whatever finish line they've set for themselves. Social media has created an entire culture of men performing ambition like a costume, wearing it loudly so everyone knows they're going somewhere. Your ambition is different. It's not performed. It's not announced. It's not worn on your sleeve or shouted from your bio or dropped into conversations as a subtle flex. It just exists, quietly, in the background, in the way you spend your mornings before anyone is watching, in the books stacked on your nightstand that nobody knows you're reading, in the projects you're building that you don't post about, in the discipline you maintain that has no audience. And this distinction, the distinction between ambition that's performed and ambition that's lived, is something women are extraordinarily attuned to. Performed ambition is attractive for about 5 minutes. It creates a flash of intrigue that fades the moment she realizes the performance is louder than the progress. Men who talk about what they're going to do are everywhere. Men who are quietly doing it without needing the world to applaud are almost nowhere. When a woman encounters a man whose ambition is evident, not in his words, but in his behavior, something clicks. She doesn't just see a man with goals, she sees a man with internal motivation. A man who does what he does because the work itself matters to him, not because the recognition matters. And that internal motivation signals something profoundly important in mate selection. It signals reliability. Because externally motivated men are vulnerable to collapse when the external rewards disappear, when the applause stops, when the likes dry up, when the audience moves on. But internally motivated men keep building regardless, because the engine driving them is inside, not outside. And that engine doesn't need fuel from the world to keep running. She doesn't need you to tell her about your ambition. She needs to discover it through the evidence of how you live. Through the books you read, the habits you keep, the quiet progress you make when the spotlight is off. That discovery, that moment when she realizes you've been building something significant without needing anyone to validate it, creates a form of respect that no amount of talk could ever produce. Carry your ambition. Don't wear it. Sign 4. You make people feel intelligent around you. This is the quality that people feel, but rarely name. And it's one of the most magnetically attractive traits a human being can carry. Some men make people feel small. They dominate conversations with their knowledge. They correct minor mistakes. They display intelligence as a competitive weapon, constantly one-upping, name-dropping ideas, ensuring that everyone in the room knows they're the smartest person present. And they mistake the silence that follows for respect. It's not respect, it's withdrawal. People shut down around men who make them feel intellectually inferior. You do the opposite. Something about how you engage in conversation makes other people feel sharper, more articulate, more insightful. They walk away from talking to you thinking, "That was a great conversation," and attributing the quality of the exchange to their own contribution rather than yours. They feel like they said interesting things, like their ideas were valuable, like they were, in your presence, a more thoughtful version of themselves, and they have no idea that you created that experience for them. You did it through specific behaviors you probably don't even recognize as skills. You asked questions that drew out their best thinking instead of showcasing yours. You built on their ideas instead of replacing them with your own. You paused after they spoke, giving their words weight rather than immediately pivoting to your response. You expressed genuine interest in their perspective rather than waiting for them to finish so you could correct them. This quality is astonishingly rare because it requires something most intelligent men refuse to give: the willingness to let someone else feel like the smartest person in the room, the willingness to use your intelligence in service of others rather than in competition with them, the willingness to elevate rather than dominate. Women are magnetically drawn to men who make them feel intelligent, not because they need the ego boost, because the feeling of being intellectually respected by a man they admire is one of the most intimate experiences a woman can have. It says, "I see your mind. I value your mind. Your thoughts are worth my genuine attention." And in a world where most men either ignore a woman's intellect or compete with it, the man who genuinely celebrates it becomes singular, irreplaceable. The person she wants to talk to at the end of every day for the rest of her life. Sign: you hold responsibility without being asked. This is the sign that separates the man she dates from the man she builds with. The quality I told you would define the difference between temporary attraction and permanent partnership. Something needs to be done. Nobody assigned it to you. Nobody asked. Nobody would notice if you didn't do it, but you see it and you handle it quietly, without announcement, without expectation of credit. The bill at dinner. You don't do the awkward dance. You handle it. The friend going through a crisis. You don't wait to be asked for help. You show up. The logistical problem that everyone else is ignoring. You solve it. The responsibility that fell through the cracks. You pick it up. Not because you're the designated responsible person, because your internal wiring simply won't allow you to see a gap and walk past it. This quality is what psychologists call proactive responsibility. And it is one of the single most attractive non-physical traits documented in long-term mate selection research. Not reactive responsibility, where you do what you're told. Proactive responsibility, where you identify what needs to be done and do it without external prompting. The reason this quality is so deeply craved is evolutionary. For thousands of years, the survival of a family unit depended on the male's ability to anticipate needs, identify threats, and take action without waiting for someone to delegate the task. A man who only acted when instructed was a liability. A man who saw what needed to happen and handled it autonomously was a provider in the deepest sense of the word. Not just a provider of resources, a provider of order, of stability, of the quiet assurance that things will be taken care of because someone is paying attention. And here's what makes this quality devastating in modern attraction. Women are exhausted by men who need to be managed, who need to be asked, who need to be reminded, who need explicit instructions for every task that any observant adult could identify on their own. The term emotional labor exists because so many women carry the invisible burden of managing not just their own responsibilities, but the responsibilities of the men around them. Delegating, reminding, following up, carrying the mental load of a household or a relationship, because their partner simply doesn't see what needs to be done unless it's pointed out. When you see it and handle it without being asked, you're not just being responsible, you're lifting a weight she didn't know she was carrying. You're demonstrating that she doesn't have to manage you, doesn't have to remind you, doesn't have to be your project manager in addition to being your partner. And that relief, That profound, bone-deep relief of being with a man who handles things simply because they need handling is one of the most powerful forms of attraction that exists. She doesn't want a man who helps when asked. She wants a man who sees when help is needed and moves without being asked. That distinction is everything. Sign 6. Your humor doesn't require a victim. Funny men are attractive. This isn't controversial. Research consistently ranks humor among the top 3 most desired traits in a long-term partner. But not all humor is created equal. And the type of humor you use reveals more about your character than almost any other social behavior. Most men default to humor that requires a target. Sarcasm aimed at someone in the group. A joke at someone else's expense. Mockery disguised as playfulness. Teasing that lands just a little too hard. Humor that gets laughs by making someone else the punchline. This kind of humor works in the short term. It generates reactions. It creates social energy. It establishes a pecking order where the funny man is at the top and the target is at the bottom. But the woman who's paying attention, the one evaluating you for something deeper than entertainment value, registers something troubling underneath the laughter. She registers cruelty, not overt cruelty. Subtle cruelty. The kind that hides behind, "I'm just joking," and "don't be so sensitive." The kind that makes her wonder, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, when does he turn that weapon on me? Your humor is different. It's observational, self-aware, playful, without being pointed. It finds absurdity in situations rather than flaws in people. It makes people laugh without making anyone feel small. It creates connection rather than hierarchy. It includes rather than excludes. And that type of humor that doesn't need a victim, signals something profoundly attractive. It signals security. A man who needs to put others down to be funny is a man compensating for something. A man whose humor lifts the room without diminishing anyone in it is a man operating from a place of genuine confidence and genuine goodwill. Women notice this distinction far more than men realize. They're tracking not just whether you're funny, but who bears the cost of your humor. And when the answer is nobody, because his humor creates joy without creating casualties, they found something rare enough to hold on to. Sign 7. Your attention is deliberate, not distributed. The modern world has created an epidemic of fragmented attention. Everyone is half present, half listening, half engaged. One eye on the person in front of them and one eye on the screen in their pocket. Conversations happen in the gaps between notifications. Connection happens in the margins between distractions. You're different. When you're with someone, you're with them fully. Your phone doesn't appear on the table. Your eyes don't drift to screens. Your mind doesn't fragment across 12 competing inputs. You give the person in front of you something that has become so rare in modern life that most people have forgotten what it feels like. Undivided attention. Research in social neuroscience has shown that the human brain is remarkably sensitive to the quality of attention being received. We can detect, below conscious awareness, the difference between someone who is fully present and someone who is performing presence while their mind is elsewhere. The fully present person triggers deeper trust responses, higher oxytocin release, and stronger feelings of social bonding. The partially present person triggers subtle but measurable increases in cortisol and social anxiety. In other words, your full attention literally changes the neurochemistry of the person receiving it. Being fully present with someone is not just polite, it's biochemically transformative, and in the context of attraction, deliberate attention is one of the most powerful tools you possess. Because when a woman receives your full, undistracted, deliberately focused attention, she feels something she almost never feels in modern social life. She feels like she matters. Not in an abstract, everyone matters sense. In a specific, tangible, right now, in this moment, you are the only thing in my world sense. That feeling is addictive. Not because she's needy, because the experience of being truly seen by another human being without competition from devices, without the fragmentation of divided focus, without the subtle message of, "You're one of many things competing for my attention right now," activates something deep in the human need for connection that modern life has systematically starved. You feed that need, not by trying, by simply giving what you naturally give. Full, deliberate, unhurried attention. And the woman who receives it from you will remember how it felt long after she's forgotten what you talked about. Sign 8. You carry gentleness without losing your edge. This is the final sign, and it contains a paradox that most men spend their entire lives failing to resolve. A paradox that, if you've naturally resolved it, places you in a category of attractiveness that almost no man ever reaches. The paradox is this: women want a man who is strong, and women want a man who is gentle, not one or the other, both simultaneously, in the same man, and not alternating between the two like a switch being flipped. Holding both at the same time, like a hand that can form a fist but chooses to stay open. Most men collapse into one side. Some become hard, tough, emotionally armored. They confuse gentleness with weakness and remove it from their personality entirely, thinking they're becoming stronger when they're actually becoming brittle. These men can protect, but they can't comfort. They can lead, but they can't nurture. They can be relied upon in a crisis, but they can't be reached in a quiet moment. Other men collapse into softness. They become accommodating, agreeable, so gentle that the edge disappears entirely. They confuse strength with toxicity and abandon it, thinking they're becoming better when they're actually becoming incomplete. These men can comfort, but they can't protect. They can empathize, but they can't lead. They can be emotionally available, but they can't make a woman feel safe in a way that requires backbone. You hold both, and you hold them at the same time. You can be firm without being cruel, direct without being cold, protective without being controlling. You can set a boundary with calm authority and then hold someone who's hurting with complete tenderness 5 minutes later. You can challenge someone intellectually and then make them laugh with a warmth that says, "I see you and I value you," without any contradiction between the two energies. This is what psychologists describe as integrated masculinity, the union of strength and sensitivity in a single, coherent identity. And it is, across every study I've ever read on female mate preferences, the single most desired combination of traits in a long-term partner. Not strength alone, not sensitivity alone, the integration of both. Because a woman needs to know 2 things about the man she builds a life with. First, that he is strong enough to handle what life throws at them, that he won't collapse, won't crumble, won't disappear when things get hard. Second, that he is gentle enough to handle her vulnerability, her imperfections, her moments of weakness, her need to be held without being judged. The man who can provide both of those things, strength in the face of the world and gentleness in the face of her, is the man she doesn't just choose. He's the man she stops looking after. Because the search is over, she found the paradox she's been looking for her entire life. Resolved, walking around in one body, sitting across from her, looking at her with eyes that are somehow both fierce and kind at the same time. If that's you, you carry something that can't be developed in a gym, can't be purchased with a salary, can't be learned from a video. It lives in the intersection of your experiences, your character, and the emotional work you've done on yourself over years. It's not a quality you perform. It's a quality you are. And it is, without question, the rarest and most attractive thing a man can be. The world gave you a checklist: height, money, jawline, status, muscle. It told you to measure yourself against that checklist and feel inadequate wherever you fell short. It told you that attraction is a transaction based on tangible assets, and that if your assets don't meet the threshold, you're out of the game. The world lied, not partially, completely. Because the qualities that make a woman choose a man for life, the qualities that make her stay when staying is hard, the qualities that make her look at him 20 years later with the same certainty she felt on the first night she knew, those qualities aren't on the checklist. They never were. They're in how he makes her feel in a room full of chaos, in how he listens when listening costs him nothing but changes everything for her, in how he carries his ambition without needing anyone to clap, in how he sees what needs to be done and does it before being asked, in how he makes her laugh without anyone paying the price, in how he gives her his full attention like it's the easiest thing in the world, in how he holds both strength and tenderness in the same body without contradiction. These are the qualities she craves. The qualities she's been searching for through every disappointing relationship and every almost right connection and every man who looked the part but couldn't play it. If you carry these qualities, stop measuring yourself against a checklist that was never designed to capture what you actually are. Your value isn't visible in a mirror. It's visible in the faces of the people around you, in how they respond to your presence, in how they trust you, in how they soften around you, in how they tell you things they don't tell anyone else. You are not the man the world taught you to want to be. You are the man she's been hoping actually exists, and you do. If this video made you see yourself differently, subscribe. This channel is for men who are building something real, not a persona, not a brand, a life, a character. The kind of man that women don't just notice, but need. The kind of man the world doesn't celebrate loudly enough, but depends on more than it will ever admit. Drop a comment and tell me which quality you carry that you never realized was valuable. I want to hear it. Because the comment section of this video is going to become proof that the qualities the world overlooks are the qualities the world needs most. I'll see you in the next one.